Part 1. Fracture Lines. The Dragon Under Siege. At the opening of the gathering storm, the world no longer teeters on the brink of catastrophe. It has begun to slide into it. The cleansing of Sidene, accomplished at terrible risk in the previous volume, should have marked a turning point toward hope. Instead, it has accelerated instability. The shadow grows bolder, nations remain divided, and the dragon reborn stands at the center of a world increasingly unable to endure the weight he carries. Rand al'Thor has become something harder than he once was. The shepherd of the two rivers, who once hesitated to kill even in self-defense, now thinks in terms of necessary sacrifice and strategic annihilation. He believes the last battle cannot be won through sentiment. Mercy, he concludes, is a liability. The memory of every betrayal, the Tower embassy that kidnapped and tortured him, the manipulation of Aes Sedai, the duplicity of nobles, has calcified into emotional armor. The Aegustat voice of Luz. Theron Telamon no longer rages as it once did. Instead, it murmurs with eerie clarity. Rand's internal fragmentation has begun to stabilize, but not in a way that promises health. Rather than fighting the ancient voice, Rand sometimes listens to it. Sometimes he agrees with it. The boundaries between his own thoughts and those of the long-dead dragon blur. Politically, Rand's greatest unresolved threat lies with the Seancian Empire. Their conquests in the south have reshaped the map, and their domain channelers represent the most disciplined and efficient military use of the one power in the world. Rand understands that fighting them outright would divide humanity before Tarmangaidan even begins. A truce is essential. He arranges a meeting with Tuon, now Empress of the Seanchan, though the encounter is strained from its inception. Tuon's worldview is built on order, hierarchy, and the absolute righteousness of the Crystal Throne. She does not recognize Rand as the Dragon Reborn in the same way the Westlands do. To her, he is a powerful channeler and a destabilizing warlord. Rand, for his part, cannot accept the Seanchan practice of leashing channelers. Their cultural bedrock is incompatible with his moral convictions. The negotiations collapse under this ideological weight. Neither side yields. The tension culminates not in treaty but in violence. A Seanchan strike force attacks, deploying domain with ruthless coordination. Lightning tears through the sky. Earth explodes upward in jagged pillars. Rand counters with overwhelming force, wielding Sidene with terrifying precision. Entire landscapes are reshaped in moments. Observers note something deeply unsettling. Rand channels with no visible emotion. There is no rage, no grief, only cold calculation. His use of the power is efficient, devastating, and detached. The emotional fracture deepens when Semirhage, one of the Forsaken, infiltrates Rand's camp. Disguised and cunning, she uses a male Adem to enslave him. For perhaps the first time since his captivity in the White Tower, Rand is rendered utterly powerless. Worse, he is forced to nearly kill Min Farshaw under compulsion. The humiliation and violation are catastrophic. Rand's deepest fear, that he is a danger to those he loves, seems confirmed. When he finally breaks free and destroys Semirhage with balefire, he does so not in uncontrolled fury, but in something far colder. After this moment, Rand makes a conscious decision. He will become harder still. He will excise hesitation from his soul. If compassion makes him vulnerable, then compassion must go. Those closest to him begin to see the change. Min senses the gathering darkness around him in her viewings. Nineve fears that he is losing himself. Even Cadsuane Maledrin, who believes Rand must be guided into emotional balance, finds her influence slipping. Rand begins to consider solutions that would once have horrified him. Obliteration instead of negotiation, destruction instead of persuasion. Meanwhile, the land itself reflects growing instability. Crops fail mysteriously. Food spoils without cause. Strange, localized distortions, bubbles of evil manifest unpredictably. Reality seems thinner, as though the Dark One's prison weakens further with each passing day. By the end of this first movement, Rand stands isolated at the center of converging storms, political, metaphysical, and personal. He believes he must sacrifice his humanity to save the world. The tragedy is that he may be right, or he may doom it by trying. Part 2. The Amirlan in Chains, Egwene's War of Endurance. While Rand hardens himself into something nearly unrecognizable, a different kind of strength is being forged in the heart of Tar Valon. Egwene Alvere, raised Amirlan's seat by the rebel Aes Sedai, now sits imprisoned within the White Tower itself. Captured during a daring but ill-fated maneuver meant to force reunification, she refuses to acknowledge Elyda's authority and equally refuses to renounce her own. Her captivity is not dramatic in the traditional sense. There are no dungeon chains or torture chambers. Instead, there is humiliation, reduction, and systematic undermining. Elyda strips Egwene of privileges and demotes her to the status of novice. She is assigned menial labor, publicly reprimanded, and beaten with the strap as punishment for perceived insolence. The intent is not merely to discipline her, but to break her symbolically. Yet Egwene does not break. She endures each punishment with composure. She follows Tower law meticulously, refusing to grant Elyda legitimate cause for harsher action. When beaten, she neither weeps nor rages. When ordered to scrub floors, she does so with quiet dignity. Every act of obedience is deliberate, not submission, but strategy. The Sisters of the White Tower begin to notice. Many who once supported Elyda did so out of habit, politics, or fear of instability. But Egwene's unwavering conduct forces comparison. Where Elyda rules through paranoia and increasingly erratic decrees, Egwene embodies calm authority. Even as a novice in white, she carries herself as the Amirlan seat. Her influence spreads subtly. Novices and accepted whisper of her courage. Sisters assigned to supervise her begin to question whether the woman they punish is, in fact, the rightful Amirlan. Egwene carefully reminds them of Tower traditions, of the unity that once defined the Aes Sedai, and of the catastrophic danger of division as Tarman Gaidon approaches. The Uaifu, political fracture that split the Tower into rebel and loyalist factions, has weakened Aes Sedai authority across the world. Monarchs question their reliability. The Black Ajah's infiltration has further corroded trust. Egwene understands that before the last battle can be fought, the Tower must be whole, not merely in name, but in spirit. The crisis that transforms quiet resistance into open reckoning arrives without warning. The Xianshan attack Tar Valon. Raken descend from the sky, their shadows sweeping across the White Tower's white spires. Domain unleash coordinated waves of lightning and fire. The city erupts into chaos as Aes Sedai scramble to mount a defense. The raid is swift, disciplined, and devastating. Sisters are captured and collared. Entire sections of the Tower are shattered. In the midst of the assault, Egwene acts. Though technically a prisoner and stripped of authority, she channels to defend the Tower. She organizes scattered sisters into defensive formations. She directs novices and accepted to safety. Her commands are obeyed instinctively, not because of title, but because of presence. The contrast with Elyda becomes stark. Elida hesitates, issues contradictory orders, and obsesses over maintaining control rather than responding decisively to the threat. Egwene, by contrast, focuses entirely on preservation and coordination. Her leadership during the raid becomes undeniable proof of her capability. When the Seanchan withdraw, having captured numerous domain but failing to break the tower entirely, the psychological damage lingers. The White Tower, symbol of unassailable authority for 3,000 years, has been invaded and scarred. The Hall of the Tower begins to reassess. Elida's mismanagement, her obsession with controlling Rand al'Thor, and her increasing paranoia can no longer be ignored. Egwene, still technically a captive novice, has demonstrated courage, clarity, and devotion to the tower above personal power. Momentum shifts rapidly. Sisters once loyal to Elida begin to defect quietly. The idea of reunification under Egwene no longer seems radical. It seems necessary. When Elida herself is eventually captured by the Seanchan during the raid's aftermath, the final barrier collapses. The Hall moves to recognize Egwene as a Myrlin seat of a reunified White Tower. Her victory is not achieved through armies or dramatic duels. It is won through endurance, restraint, and unwavering identity. Egwene proves that authority is not conferred by title alone. It is embodied. By the end of this second movement, the White Tower stands whole again, though scarred. Its unity is fragile but real. Egwene now bears the burden of reform, reconciliation, and preparation for the last battle. While Rand isolates himself in emotional frost, Egwene gathers strength through connection and institutional healing. Two leaders rise in very different ways. Both will shape the fate of the world. Part 3. The Shadow Within, Mesaana, and the Fracturing of Trust. As the White Tower struggles to restore unity under Egwene Alvere, it becomes increasingly clear that the division which split the Aes Sedai was not merely political miscalculation or personal ambition. It was engineered. One of the Forsaken has been operating within the tower itself, nurturing paranoia, deepening mistrust, and subtly encouraging every fracture that weakened Aes Sedai authority. That Forsaken is Mesaana. Mesaana's presence within Tar Valon represents one of the Shadow's most effective long-term infiltrations. Unlike her more overtly destructive counterparts, she does not rely on brute force. Instead, she corrupts institutions from within. By encouraging suspicion between Ajas, manipulating information, and influencing key decisions, she has ensured that when the tower split, it did so violently and completely. Even after reunification begins, Mesaana remains embedded in the structure of the tower. Her influence lingers in the form of hidden Black Aja sisters, coded communications, and lingering distrust between factions that only recently fought one another. Egwene understands that reunification without purification will only create a fragile facade of unity. If the tower is to stand against the Shadow in the last battle, it must be cleansed of internal rot. Egwene's approach to this problem differs sharply from Rand's increasingly aggressive strategies. She does not lash out in sweeping purges or public accusations. Instead, she reinforces law, tradition, and accountability. She reasserts the authority of the Hall while maintaining personal oversight. She encourages transparency in investigations into the Black Aja while preventing hysteria from spiraling out of control. In doing so, she strengthens institutional resilience rather than relying solely on personal dominance. The confrontation with Mesaana ultimately takes place not in the waking world, but in Tel'aran'ar Hyod, the world of dreams. This realm, shaped by will and perception, becomes the battlefield for one of the most psychologically significant conflicts in the novel. Messana attempts to use illusion and manipulation to undermine Egwene's confidence. She tries to distort reality around her opponent, to weaken her sense of identity. However, Egwene has grown into her authority. Her time as a captive, her endurance under humiliation, and her unwavering belief in her own legitimacy have given her an internal stability that Messana cannot easily disrupt. In Teleranarhyod, strength derives from clarity of self. Egwene possesses that clarity. When they clash, it is not a duel of explosive weaves alone, but of will. Egwene asserts the solidity of her own identity and rejects Messana's distortions. The Forsaken, who once thrived on institutional decay, finds herself overwhelmed by Egwene's composure and force of personality. The confrontation ends with Messana's mind shattered, her consciousness broken under the strain of defeat. This victory is symbolically immense. The White Tower has not merely reunified, it has expelled one of the ancient architects of its division. Egwene's triumph demonstrates that moral authority and psychological resilience can overcome even centuries-old corruption. Yet while this internal victory strengthens the tower, the broader world continues to deteriorate. Across the Westlands, signs of the Dark One's growing influence multiply. Food spoils inexplicably even when stored carefully. Grain rots in sealed bins. Meat turns rancid within hours. Farmers who once depended on predictable seasons find their crops failing without reason. These phenomena are not isolated incidents, but widespread symptoms of metaphysical strain. Bubbles of evil appear with increasing frequency. Objects animate without warning. Walls ripple as if alive. Violence erupts spontaneously in previously peaceful villages. Reality itself seems less stable, as though the pattern is being tugged and twisted by unseen hands. Within the Shadow's ranks, strategy shifts. Moradin observes Rand's psychological decline with calculating patience. He senses that the Dragon Reborn is approaching a breaking point. If Rand succumbs to despair or nihilism, the Dark One may achieve victory without the need for total military conquest. The Shadow understands that corrupting the dragon is more efficient than destroying him outright. Thus, while Egwene consolidates unity and eliminates infiltration, Rand continues to spiral inward. The contrast becomes sharper with each chapter. One leader strengthens through connection and shared purpose. The other isolates himself in preparation for what he believes must be solitary sacrifice. By the end of this section, the forces of light have achieved meaningful internal victories, yet the world itself feels increasingly unstable. The pattern strains under accelerating pressure. Political unity is incomplete. Environmental decay spreads. The Dragon Reborn stands on the brink of emotional collapse. The storm is no longer gathering in the distance. It presses against every horizon at once. Part 4, Dragonmount, Despair, Revelation, and the Reforging of the Dragon. The culmination of Rand al'Thor's internal struggle occurs atop Dragonmount, where the weight of the world presses down on him with relentless force. For years, he has been defined by prophecy and responsibility, by the cyclical torment of his predecessor Luz Theron Telamon, and by the knowledge that millions will die if he fails. At the start of the gathering storm, this burden has hardened him into a figure of calculation and ruthlessness. Compassion is considered weakness. Mercy is a liability. Yet even in this self-imposed detachment, cracks appear in the armor, hinting at the fragile humanity that still survives within him. The immediate trigger of Rand's crisis is the realization that all his efforts, all his sacrifices, might not be enough. The Seanchan remain unconquered, political alliances remain fragile, the Forsaken plot ceaselessly. The Blight pulses with unholy vitality. Even as he wields the cleansed Satan with unmatched skill, he recognizes that sheer power alone will not secure victory. Desperation grows in proportion to his responsibility. Rand considers the ultimate act, using the Choedan Call to annihilate the pattern itself. In his mind, if existence is an endless cycle of suffering, perhaps destruction is the only mercy. For a brief, terrifying moment, he contemplates ending all life in order to spare the world from inevitable pain. It is a nihilism born of fatigue, guilt, and accumulated trauma. This is a dragon reborn at the edge of despair, confronted by the weight of a universe that demands perfection from a single man. The psychological and philosophical stakes of this moment are immense. Rand does not act impulsively. He considers history, prophecy, morality, and the memories of countless lives carried within Lews Therin's mind. Every choice is measured against potential consequence. The temptation of total annihilation becomes a test of character as much as a strategic consideration. And then revelation strikes. Rand recalls not only suffering, but hope. He recalls the laughter of friends and allies, the quiet moments of beauty in life, the steadfastness of those who have believed in him despite fear and disappointment. The memory of Min Farshaw, of Nynaeve, of Perrin and Mat, of the bonds that tie him to the world, pierces the armor of hardened despair. He sees that life, even in its suffering, contains meaning. The wheel of time turns, and with each turn comes the possibility of renewal. Pain exists, but so does love, loyalty, and joy. In that pivotal instant, Rand makes a conscious choice. He will not destroy the pattern. He will endure, not because hope guarantees victory, but because hope itself is worth preserving. This decision is both moral and existential, a synthesis of his experience as Rand al'Thor and the centuries of knowledge and failure contained within Lews Therin. He embraces the duality of power and responsibility, fury and compassion, death and life. The physical and metaphysical consequences are immediate and profound. The storm that has hovered above Dragonmount, a symbol of Rand's internal turmoil, begins to clear. Light bursts through clouds, illuminating the slopes and valleys below. For the first time in years, Rand experiences genuine relief, a mixture of awe, sorrow, and elation. The voice of Lews Therin merges completely with his own, not as a separate consciousness, but as integrated wisdom. Madness, which had loomed on the horizon of every decision, recedes. This moment also transforms Rand's approach to leadership. Where he had considered using fear, destruction, and emotional detachment to compel obedience, he now recognizes the power of example, courage, and connection. The Dragon Reborn is still the most dangerous man alive, still capable of overwhelming destruction, but he is no longer defined solely by that threat. He has regained humanity, without relinquishing strength. Descending Dragonmount, Rand encounters emissaries from the borderlands, allies who have long questioned his judgment and temperament. In this new light, he responds with calm authority. He addresses their concerns with clarity, humility, and unyielding purpose. Whereas once he would have reacted with impatience or cold calculation, he now inspires loyalty through demonstrated balance and insight. This internal transformation also reshapes the relationship between Rand and his allies. Min sees the dragon return to himself. Nynaeve recognizes the balance restored. Mat and Perrin witness the restoration of purpose tempered by wisdom. Even Cad Swan, who has struggled for years to temper his recklessness, acknowledges that Rand has finally mastered the integration of power, responsibility, and personal identity. By the end of Part 4, Rand has emerged from the crucible of despair not simply intact, but fundamentally reforged. The Dragon Reborn, now, embodies both the raw, terrifying power that the Shadow fears and the human empathy that the world needs. The storm within has passed, leaving clarity, readiness, and renewed resolve. Yet while Rand's personal crisis reaches resolution, the world around him remains precarious. The Shadow is still active, the Seanchan remain a threat, and Tarmon Gaidon looms as an inevitable horizon. The internal victory, while profound, is merely the foundation for the final struggle. Part 5. Alignment before the last battle, repositioning the forces of light. With Rand al'Thor's internal transformation complete, the final sections of the Gathering Storm focus on the consolidation and alignment of the forces of light, preparing the world for Tarmon Gaidon. Unlike previous volumes, where chaos and division dominated, this part emphasizes readiness, coordination, and the moral consequences of leadership under pressure. Rand's first priority is the borderlands. The rulers of Andor, Saldea, Kandor, Shi'Enar, Arafel, and the other northern and eastern nations have long been wary of the Dragon Reborn. They have seen him oscillate between brilliance and near madness, between decisive leadership and terrifying detachment. Now, having descended from Dragonmount renewed in purpose and clarity, Rand approaches them with a tempered demeanor. He addresses their concerns not through intimidation, but through reasoning and demonstration. He negotiates alliances, reassures suspicious rulers, and establishes a framework for coordinated defense against both the Shadow and the destabilizing forces that still threaten the Westlands. By listening as well as commanding, he restores confidence among allies who once doubted him. This realignment is mirrored in his relationships with the Ashaman. Long estranged by fear, misunderstanding, and the potential threat of their overwhelming power, the male channelers begin to recognize that Rand's renewed balance offers them a coherent path forward. Trust begins to replace suspicion, laying the groundwork for cooperation that will be critical during the last battle. Coordination between the Aes Sedai, the Ashaman, and the Borderlands is fragile, but gradually becoming functional, a testament to Rand's new approach of tempered authority. Meanwhile, Egwene Alver continues her work within the White Tower. The tower, long fractured by political intrigue and the infiltration of the Black Aja, is now formally reunified under her leadership. Her triumph over Mesiana in Tel'aran'rhiod and her moral authority displayed during the Seanchan raid solidify her position in the eyes of every sister who previously doubted her. Egwene begins to implement reforms aimed at preparing the tower for the last battle. Training protocols are re-examined, lines of communication clarified, and cooperation with the Ashaman cautiously encouraged. While still constrained by centuries of tradition, Egwene's vision is forward-looking. She understands that survival and victory demand adaptability and unity. Even as internal consolidation proceeds, the world itself remains unstable. The Seanchan continue their aggressive expansion and unpredictable maneuvers. Pockets of the Blight pulse with unholy vitality, producing creatures and phenomena that unsettle even the most seasoned soldiers. The Shadows remaining forsaken, though diminished in number, continue to plot and manipulate, taking advantage of remaining fractures in leadership and exploiting moments of indecision. The pattern itself exhibits strain, as if aware that the ultimate confrontation approaches. Against this backdrop, Rand demonstrates a remarkable evolution in judgment. Where once he might have chosen extreme measures, even mass destruction, to enforce compliance or eliminate perceived threats, he now considers the ethical and strategic ramifications of each action. He is capable of decisive violence, but only when it is necessary and proportionate. The Dragon Reborn has reconciled the dualities of his existence: power with responsibility, foresight with empathy, and fury with reason. This balance transforms him from a feared and unpredictable force into a beacon of leadership that inspires trust and loyalty across factions. The novel concludes with the world poised for the last battle. The forces of light have regained cohesion. The White Tower is unified. The borderlands stand prepared. And Rand al'Thor has regained both his humanity and his strategic clarity. Alliances, though fragile, are now operational. Key adversaries of the Shadow have been neutralized, while others are contained or mitigated. The Xianshan threat remains, but it is no longer an uncontrollable wildcard. Every major character is positioned in preparation for the ultimate confrontation. A gathering storm ends not with a climactic battle, but with alignment. The storm that once raged within Rand has broken, leaving him ready to lead. Egwene has proven herself capable of institutional reform and moral leadership. The Shadow has been checked, though not eliminated, and the world awaits the inevitable convergence of prophecy and action. The final image is one of tense equilibrium. The forces of light consolidated but aware of the enormous challenges to come. Tarman Gaidon, the last battle, is no longer distant prophecy. It approaches on the horizon, and the leaders of the world are finally prepared, physically, mentally, and morally, to meet it. The novel closes with a sense of grim optimism. Victory is not assured, and sacrifices will be immense. Yet for the first time in decades, the Dragon Reborn stands not as a man consumed by power and fear, but as a leader capable of shaping the world toward survival, hope, and eventual triumph.
Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more videos.